Zane Veller didn't go to karaoke bars to sing. He went because it was the only place with free fries on Tuesdays, and after rent, groceries, and his daughter's school fees, free was about all he could afford. Daddy, are you gonna sing tonight? 7-year-old Sienna looked up at him, her curly hair bouncing as she fidgeted in her seat. He poked her cheek with a soft smile. Only if you promise not to laugh. I never laugh, she said seriously, then giggled. Okay, maybe just a little. Zane chuckled, rubbing the back of his neck. He glanced at the dusty karaoke machine in the corner of the small bar, tucked between a dartboard and a neon Bud Light sign. It was a weeknight, half empty, the regulars nursing drinks, the occasional bursts of off-key notes floating through the air. He hadn't sung in front of anyone since college. Since everything changed. Sienna tugged his sleeve.
Do it.
You said life's about trying, remember? Now you're using my words against me, huh?
She grinned. Yep.
Zane sighed dramatically and stood.
Fine.
But you're clapping the loudest, deal? Deal. He walked toward the machine, picked a song he knew by heart, and waited for the music to start. His voice was rusty at first, but as the melody picked up, something clicked. He closed his eyes, let himself feel it. People started watching, some smiled. Others clapped along. And at one of the booths near the back, a woman in a sleek black coat stopped sipping her wine. Raya Granger hadn't planned on staying. Her driver was waiting outside. But the second she heard that voice, rough, warm, honest, she froze. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. And when she looked up and saw him, faded jeans, work boots, messy dark hair, and a tired but genuine smile, something in her chest shifted. She didn't recognize him, which was rare. Her world was full of pretense men who wanted to impress her, manipulate her, or marry her bank account. But this guy? He didn't even glance in her direction. After the song, Zane gave a little bow and walked back to Sienna, who clapped like her hands were on fire. You were amazing, Daddy. You're just saying that because you want dessert. Maybe, she said, laughing. Raya stood slowly, drawn to them. She didn't know what she was doing. She didn't walk up to strangers. She didn't talk to men in bars. But something about the way the little girl looked at her dad, like he was her entire world, made her feet move. Hey, she said gently, stopping at their table. That was a great performance. Zane looked up, surprised. His eyes met hers, green, sharp, but kind.
Oh, thanks.
Just trying not to embarrass my kid. I think you did the opposite, Raya said with a smile. She looks proud. I am, Sienna announced. Zane chuckled, then extended a hand.
Zane.
And this is Sienna. Raya shook his hand.
Raya?
You sing too? He asked. She hesitated. Only in the shower. Or the car. Sometimes both. Sienna wrinkled her nose. You should. It's fun.
Raya laughed softly.
Maybe next time. They talked for a bit about music, Sienna's obsession with science kits, Zane's job at the auto shop. Raya didn't mention what she did. She usually said consulting when she didn't feel like explaining that she was the CEO of a wellness empire worth over $75 million. She liked the way Zane listened. He didn't interrupt. He didn't try to impress. He was just himself. Sienna yawned around 9:30, and Zane picked up their coats. Early school day tomorrow, he said. We should head out. Raya nodded, a little disappointed. It was really nice meeting you both. Zane smiled.
Yeah.
You too. He paused, then reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a napkin. I don't usually do this, but here's my number. If you ever feel like singing in a car again, or grabbing fries.
Raya blinked, surprised.
Most people would have asked her for hers. Thanks, she said, folding the napkin and slipping it into her purse. I just might. They walked out, hand in hand, Sienna leaning against her dad's side. Raya sat back down, heart beating faster than it should have been. She'd never met a man like that.
Warm.
Funny. protective,
Real.
and completely unaware of who she was. Back in their apartment, Zane tucked Sienna into bed with her favorite stuffed bear, then sat down at the tiny kitchen table. He stared at the empty fridge, then at the overdue gas bill.
He should have asked Raya what she did.
But something told him it didn't matter. He liked her laugh, her easy smile, the way she looked at his daughter, like she mattered. He didn't know she was worth more than every building on their street combined. And she didn't care that he was barely scraping by. Over the next week, Raya couldn't stop thinking about him. She'd been to Tokyo, Paris, and Dubai in the last year, but the tiny bar and the single dad with the tired eyes stayed in her mind. She dug out the napkin, dialed the number. Hello. Zane's voice was a little hesitant. Hey, Raya said, trying to sound casual. It's Raya, from the bar.
Oh. Hey.
I wasn't sure you'd actually call. Neither was I. He laughed. Well, glad you did. They met again. And then again. Always somewhere simple parks, diners, book fairs for Sienna. Zane paid when he could, even though Raya could have bought the whole diner just to make a point. But she let him, because he had pride.
And she respected that.
Sienna adored her, called her Miss Ray. They built model volcanoes together and baked cookies that turned into smoky disasters. Zane didn't know why he felt lighter when Raya was around, but he did. And Raya didn't know how long she could keep her secret. But she knew one thing for sure. She was falling fast and hard for the poor dad who sang karaoke for his daughter. And he had no idea she was a millionaire. Are you always this early? Raya asked as she walked up to the park bench where Zane and Sienna were already seated, a picnic blanket stretched out beneath them. Zane looked up from the sandwich he was cutting with a plastic knife. Only when the weather's nice and someone promises me the best homemade lemonade in the city. Careful, Raya said, sliding her tote bag off her shoulder. That's a serious claim. You haven't even tasted it yet. Sienna reached out eagerly. I want to try. Raya popped the cap off the mason jar and poured the pale yellow liquid into a reusable cup. Sienna took a sip, her eyes widening.
Whoa.
It's like lemon candy, but not too sweet. Can you make this every week? Zane raised an eyebrow. Every week? Sienna, we don't ask people to commit to lemonade production like it's a job. I do it, Raya said, laughing. For this kind of review, I should hire her as my brand ambassador. Zane handed her a sandwich wrapped in wax paper. Turkey and avocado. I remembered you mentioned liking both. You made this. Unless someone broke into my kitchen and had very specific sandwich preferences, yeah. She took a bite, surprised at how good it was. You're full of surprises, aren't you?
He shrugged.
I've had to learn a few skills. Cooking being one of them. Raya looked at him for a beat, noticing the way his eyes flicked between Sienna and the space around them. Always aware, always alert. You ever get time to yourself? Rarely, he said, brushing some crumbs off his jeans. But I don't mind. She's worth it. Raya nodded, unwrapping the rest of her sandwich. Still, you deserve a break sometimes. He chuckled. Trust me, a picnic in the park where someone else brings lemonade? That's luxury. Sienna had already kicked off her shoes and was running toward the nearby swing set. Zane watched her go, then leaned back against the bench. You seem like someone who's used to nicer things than this. Raya's heart skipped. Why do you say that? You've got that calm look. Like someone who's never had to count change for gas. She smiled, tight-lipped. I've had to count more than you'd think. He tilted his head, watching her. But not recently. She looked down at her cup.
No.
Not recently. Zane didn't push. Instead, he pulled out a small sketchbook from his backpack and flipped it open. Inside were pencil drawings mostly of Sienna, but also trees, buildings, little snapshots of their life. You draw? When I've got time. Just quick stuff. Helps me stay centered. Raya leaned in, captivated by a sketch showing Sienna sitting on a windowsill, her chin in her hand, gazing out. The detail was incredible, especially considering it had probably been done in minutes between chores or work. These are beautiful. He closed the book, almost shyly. Thanks. I don't show them much. You should, she said. There's a lot of feeling in them. You say that like you've bought art before.
I've
had a few pieces, she said carefully. Zane didn't ask more. He wasn't the type. And maybe that's why Raya found herself wanting to say more than she usually would. I manage a company, she added. Health and wellness products. Online mostly. Sounds like people need that, especially now. It's been good. A little overwhelming sometimes. He nodded thoughtfully. Still, you brought lemonade. So you're managing. She laughed, and the tension in her chest loosened again. Later, after they'd packed up and Sienna was busy feeding ducks by the pond, Zane turned to Raya. Would you ever want to go somewhere with just me? I mean, I know we've always hung out with Sienna, she's kind of the best third wheel, but I'd like to see you. Without juice boxes involved. Raya blinked. You're asking me out? I am, he said, standing. I'd offer you flowers, but I think Sienna picked them all. Raya smiled. I'd love that. Friday night. I'll make it work. She didn't tell him that Friday nights were usually reserved for investor dinners or boardroom updates. Instead, she blocked off the evening and told her assistant she had a personal engagement. No one asked questions, she was known for being private. Zane picked her up outside her building. Not her real one, she met him 2 blocks away, near a little cafe, where she could pretend she lived in one of the smaller units above it. She didn't want to explain the doorman, the elevator that required a key card, or the valet service. He arrived in a car that had clearly seen better years, but was clean and smelled faintly of citrus. He wore a button-up shirt, sleeves rolled just enough to show his forearms, and dark jeans that fit him like a glove. You clean up nicely, she said as she got in. You say that like I'm usually a disaster. No, I mean, she paused, grinning. Okay, maybe a little. He laughed. Fair enough. They drove to a rooftop restaurant that Zane said he'd only been to once for a friend's wedding. He'd saved up to make the night special, and though the server looked a little surprised when he handed over a crisp envelope of cash at the end, Zane didn't flinch. They talked about books neither had finished, movies they watched only halfway before falling asleep, and the strangest meals they'd ever tried. Raya told him about a trip to a spice market in Morocco, skipping over the part where she flew there on a private jet. When dessert came a shared chocolate tart with sea salt, he handed her a small, folded note. What's this? She asked. Open it. Inside was a sketch of her, laughing over the picnic blanket from earlier that week. The detail in her eyes, the upward tilt of her chin, it was her, but softer, more vibrant. You did this from memory? I don't forget faces like yours. She tucked the paper close to her chest. Zane, this is incredible. I just wanted to give you something. I can't afford gifts, but I can give you this. Her throat tightened. It's the best thing anyone's given me in a long time. When he dropped her off and she walked the 2 blocks back to her actual building, she felt like she was floating. She passed the concierge unnoticed, rode the elevator alone, and stood in her penthouse kitchen staring out at the skyline. She could buy anything, but what Zane gave her tonight could never be bought. He was falling for her, and she was falling apart. Because if he knew what she really was, how much she had, how much she hid, he might not look at her the same way again. And she wasn't ready to lose the only man who saw her for the one thing she'd almost forgotten how to be. Just Raya. The morning after their rooftop dinner, Raya sat in her office, the city skyline stretching behind her while a dozen unread emails blinked on her screen. But her eyes stayed locked on the sketch Zane had given her the night before, now delicately propped against her water carafe. It's from a man, her assistant Tasha said as she walked in carrying a tray of pressed juices. I can always tell when you're staring at something like it's sacred. Raya didn't look away. He drew it. Talented and sentimental? I'm impressed already. Raya took a slow breath. He doesn't know who I am. Not really. I've let him believe I live above a bakery and that I manage a small wellness site. Tasha raised a brow. So, he thinks you're a chill, down-to-earth woman who likes lemonade and wears jeans on dates. That's not a lie, it's just a filtered truth. I've never filtered anything in a relationship before, Raya said quietly. But with him, I'm scared if I don't, I'll lose something real. Then you have two choices, Tasha said, setting down the juices. You either keep curating your truth, or you tell him the full story. But the longer you wait, the harder the fall. Raya didn't respond. She knew Tasha was right. Zane, meanwhile, was covered in grease by mid-afternoon, bent under the hood of a '98 Buick that kept stalling and idle. His co-worker, Marcus, leaned against the workbench, sipping from a bottle of soda and watching him. You've been humming all day, Marcus said. Someone's got you in a good mood. Zane yanked off his gloves, wiped his hands on a rag. It's nothing. Nothing that made you shave twice this week and iron your shirt before work. Zane tossed the rag at him. Her name's Raya. Marcus whistled. You've been seeing her long? Couple weeks. Marcus looked curious. And she's different, Zane muttered. She listens. She's funny. She's kind to Sienna. It's like every time I'm with her, I'm not thinking about bills or repairs or what I can't give my kid. I'm just there. That's rare, man. Zane nodded, but his expression darkened. I just keep wondering what she sees in me. Marcus shrugged. Maybe she's not like the women you've known. That's what I'm afraid of. That evening, when Zane picked Sienna up from her after-school program, she ran to him with a slip of paper in her hand. They're doing a talent showcase at school next week, she said breathlessly. I signed us up. Zane blinked. You signed us up for what? The duet category. We have to sing together. You said singing's about trying and being brave. He couldn't argue with that. All right. Looks like we're rehearsing. Sienna beamed, hugging him tight. Can Raya come? I don't know if she's into elementary school talent shows. Ask her anyway. That night, he called her. She picked up after 2 rings, her voice soft. You busy Friday? He asked. For you? Never. There's a showcase at Sienna's school. She signed us up to sing a duet. I think she's hoping you'll come.
Raya smiled.
I wouldn't miss it. Friday arrived faster than expected. Zane wore a navy sweater and jeans with no holes, and Sienna wore a silver headband and matching sneakers. They arrived at the school gymnasium together, folding chairs lined in uneven rows, a painted banner over the stage that read Shine Bright Showcase. Raya arrived just before the performances began, wearing a caramel-colored coat and carrying a small bouquet of sunflowers. For Sienna, she said, handing them to the little girl, who gasped with delight. You remembered my favorite. Of course I did. Zane smiled at her. Thanks for coming. Thank you for inviting me. When it was their turn, Zane led Sienna on stage. The music started, and they began to sing him in low, steady tones, Sienna chiming in with sweet, high notes. The room warmed with applause as they finished, and Sienna took a dramatic bow. Raya stood, clapping hard, her heart full in her chest. After the show, they walked out into the cool night, Sienna skipping ahead with her sunflowers tucked under one arm. Your daughter's a star, Raya said. She gets it from her mother, Zane replied softly. Raya looked at him. You've never talked about her. She passed away when Sienna was 2.
Car accident.
She was a nurse. Raya's breath caught. Zane, I'm so sorry. It's been a few years, he said, watching Sienna turn cartwheels ahead of them. But some days, it still feels like yesterday. They walked in silence for a moment. I admire you, she said finally. He looked surprised. For what? For raising her like this. for making every moment count, for being who you are. He stopped walking. Raya, I need to ask you something. And I want the truth. Her stomach tightened. Are you seeing anyone else?
What? No.
Of course not. He exhaled, relieved. Okay. This feels like more than a few casual dinners, and I needed to know you felt the same. I do, she said, her voice steady. I've never met anyone who makes me feel the way you do. His eyes searched hers. Then I need to tell you something. I'm not rich. I'm not fancy. I'm doing the best I can most days just to keep the lights on. But I care about you, Raya. And if you're in, I'm in. No games. Her throat closed over the words she wanted to say. That she owned the building they were standing in front of. That the coat she wore cost more than his rent. That she had a driver waiting 3 blocks away to keep up the illusion. But instead, she reached for his hand. I'm in, she whispered. They kissed then, on the sidewalk under a flickering street lamp, the kind of kiss that made everything else fade into background noise, cars, footsteps, even time itself. But as Raya lay in bed that night, staring at her ceiling, the weight of her silence pressed harder against her chest. She had never lied to him outright. But she hadn't told the truth either. And soon, that lie of omission would come crashing down around them. Because the gala was only 1 week away. And Zane, who had no idea her face was plastered on every billboard for the event, would finally see exactly who she was. Not the woman who brought lemonade. Not the woman who laughed at his jokes and joined school talent shows. But the millionaire behind Granger Wellness, the empire she built, and the life she'd hidden from him. And when that happened, everything they'd built together would be put to the ultimate test. Raya felt the rod in her stomach long before the first camera flash hit her face. The Granger Wellness Charity Gala was the pinnacle event of the season, an extravagant night held atop a glass-walled hotel ballroom that wrapped around the Manhattan skyline like a crown. White-gloved servers floated between tables topped with crystal centerpieces. A string quartet played near the open balcony, and the guest list included half the Forbes Under 40 list. She stood near the entry, flawless in a tailored navy gown and diamond studs that had once belonged to her grandmother. Her name was printed in gold on the event program, her face on the oversized screens flanking the stage. There was no hiding tonight. Everyone here knew exactly who she was. And any minute now, so would Zane. She hadn't meant for it to happen this way. But when Sienna mentioned her school was fundraising for new science kits, Raya had called in a favor and quietly arranged for the gala's charitable proceeds to benefit the program. She hadn't realized the school would send home invitations to every family, and that Zane would feel obligated to attend with Sienna in tow. Now, somewhere in the lobby below, he was walking into a world she had carefully kept from him. Tasha appeared at her side with a glass of water. They just arrived. Raya didn't reach for the glass. Her throat was too tight to swallow. Is Sienna okay? She's with the event coordinator. They have a whole table for the school. It's sweet. And Zane? Tasha hesitated. He's reading the program. Raya turned slowly. Her heels echoed along the marble as she walked toward the staircase that led to the mezzanine. She stopped halfway down, her breath catching in her chest. Zane stood just inside the ballroom, Sienna's hand in his. He wore a black jacket that didn't quite fit his shoulders, and his hair was combed more neatly than usual. He looked like he'd tried. Like he didn't want to embarrass his daughter. He also looked stunned. His eyes were locked on the projection screen above the stage, where a photo of Raya was displayed beside the words Founder and CEO. He didn't move when she stepped closer. Zane, she said quietly. His eyes flicked to hers. But the warmth that usually lived there was gone. So this is who you really are. She opened her mouth, but nothing came out. He stepped back just once. You lied to me. I didn't lie, she said, the words tumbling out. I just didn't tell you everything. You let me think you lived over a bakery, that you ran a website, I brought you into my life, Raya. My daughter's life. And the whole time, you were playing make-believe. I wasn't playing anything. Her voice cracked. I tried to protect what we had. I didn't want my world to change how you saw me. He shook his head slowly. You think I care about your money? I didn't know what you'd care about.
I didn't know if you'd still want me.
I wanted you because I thought you were real. Because you weren't trying to impress me. I wasn't.
I didn't want to lead with this.
She gestured helplessly at the glittering surroundings. This isn't who I am with you. I'm not this when I'm with you. He looked around the room at the chandeliers, the velvet drapes, the clinking glasses. Then who are you, Raya? Because I don't know anymore. Sienna tugged on his arm, her voice small. Daddy, are you mad? Zane looked down at her.
No, sweetheart.
I'm not mad. I'm just trying to understand something. Raya knelt beside Sienna, touching her shoulder gently. I'm sorry I didn't tell you who I was. I never wanted to hurt either of you. Sienna looked at her, confused. But you're still you, right? You still like singing and cookies and lemon stuff. Raya nodded, her throat working. I'm still me. Zane's jaw tightened as he glanced between them. We should go. Zane, please, Raya said. Don't do this now. Not in front of her. He hesitated, then gave a slight nod. We'll talk. Later. She watched them walk away, the crowd parting around them like water. By the time she got home, the silence in her penthouse was unbearable. She kicked off her shoes and paced the length of her living room, the city lights flickering beyond the glass walls. Her phone sat untouched on the counter. No messages. The next day passed in a haze. She canceled meetings, ignored calls, reached for her phone a dozen times but never typed a word. By the second night, she couldn't take it anymore. She changed into jeans and a hoodie, tied her hair back, and drove herself to Zane's building. The elevator was out, so she climbed 3 flights of creaking stairs until she reached his door. She knocked once, then again. It opened slowly. Zane stood there in sweatpants and a faded t-shirt, his face unreadable. Can we talk? She asked. He stepped back without a word. The apartment was quiet, dimly lit. Sienna was asleep on the couch under a blanket shaped like a shark. Raya lowered her voice. I didn't mean to deceive you. Zane leaned against the kitchen counter, arms crossed. Then why didn't you tell me? You had so many chances. I was scared. I've never met someone who made me feel like I wasn't just my bank account. I didn't want to ruin it. You think I'm that shallow? No, she whispered. I think I was. He blinked. I pretended to be smaller, so you'd like me. That's not fair to you.
Or to me.
I should have trusted you more. Zane looked down at his bare feet, then back at her. You did more than keep a secret. You made me feel like I was enough. Like I could give you something you didn't already have. You did. He shook his head. I don't have jets or penthouses or whatever that was last night. You gave me a sketch of myself that made me feel seen. You gave me a place at your table. You gave me your daughter's laughter. No one's ever given me anything that mattered more.
He didn't speak.
She walked closer slowly. I'm not perfect, but I love you, Zane. I love both of you. He stared at her for a long, aching moment. Then finally, his voice broke. I love you too. Relief flooded her knees. You do. I was angry, hurt, but the truth is I was already in too deep. You're the best thing that's happened to me in a long time. She stepped into his arms, and he held her like he didn't want to let go again. The next weekend, Raya hosted a small dinner at her penthouse, not for investors, not for partners, but for Zane and Sienna. She cooked herself, with Zane helping her slice vegetables and Sienna setting the table with paper napkins and glittery stickers. Later, they lay on the balcony in blankets, watching the stars. Sienna pointed to one. That one's mine. Zane chuckled. You already took 3. Well, Raya can have one too. Raya reached over and squeezed her hand. I'll take the one next to yours. Zane looked at them both, then leaned in and kissed Raya's temple. I still can't believe you're real. She smiled against his shoulder. I am, and I'm not going anywhere. Months passed. Sienna's science program flourished, thanks to the gala funds. Zane's sketches found their way into a children's book Raya quietly published through one of her creative partners. He insisted on paying for the art supplies himself. And one quiet evening, as they walked through the park where they'd once picnicked with lemonade and turkey sandwiches, Zane stopped beneath the same tree and pulled something from his pocket.
A ring.
Simple, elegant, with a tiny sunflower etched into the band. For the woman who changed everything, he said, voice low. Will you marry me? Raya didn't hesitate. Yes. They kissed beneath the branches, Sienna spinning in circles around them. And just like that, the poor dad who sang karaoke for free fries and the millionaire who only wanted to be seen found everything they were missing in each other. Rain tapped gently against the windows as the apartment filled with the scent of cinnamon and browned butter. Zane stood at the small stove, stirring a pan of caramelizing apples while Sienna sat cross-legged on the floor, cutting shapes out of colored paper. Behind them, Raya arranged clean plates on the table, her engagement ring catching the warm light overhead. Okay, Sienna announced, holding up a lopsided heart. This one's for the door. So, everyone knows we're a love house now. Zane glanced over his shoulder. A love house? Yeah, she said, nodding. Like a regular house, but with more hugs and pancakes. Raya laughed softly, placing the last fork down. That sounds like the best kind of house. Sienna scrambled up and taped the paper heart crookedly next to the entrance.
Done.
Now it's official. The 3 of them sat down together, a quiet sense of comfort settling over the room. It had been 2 months since Zane proposed, and life had taken on a rhythm that felt effortless. Not perfect, there were still days when work ran late, or the car refused to start, or Sienna misplaced her backpack, but there was a steadiness to it all now, a shared sense that they were moving forward as a team. Zane reached for Raya's hand across the table. So, I have a question. She raised an eyebrow. Is this about the apples? Because I promise I didn't sneak any while you were in the other room. He chuckled. No, though I'm on to you. I wanted to ask what you think about a backyard wedding. Raya paused, surprised. Backyard?
Yeah.
Something small.
Just family. Friends.
Real food, real music. No 20-piece bands or aerial performers. Sienna leaned in. Can I wear a cape? As long as it's white, Zane said. Raya smiled slowly. I like that. I mean, I could plan a full-scale event in under 48 hours, but this feels more like us. He nodded. I don't want anything that makes me feel like I have to rent a tux just to fit in. You won't, she said, squeezing his fingers. You never have to fit into anything but this life. With me. With us. They spent the next week mapping out ideas. Not with spreadsheets or stylists, but with sticky notes and coffee-fueled conversations that stretched past midnight. Sienna insisted on writing the invitations herself, complete with hand-drawn borders and glitter that ended up everywhere, including Zane's eyebrows. They decided to hold it at Raya's upstate property, a quiet stretch of land with a wraparound porch and a wildflower field that bloomed in soft purples and yellows. It was the first thing she'd bought with her earnings, long before Granger Wellness became a household name. Back then, it had been a place to escape pressure. Now, it would be the place she promised her forever. Tasha offered to help coordinate, and even though the guest list remained modest, the weekend preparations became a flurry of laughter and quiet moments of awe. Zane's sister flew in from Colorado, bringing with her a vintage record player and a box of family photos. Sienna took charge of arranging wildflowers into mismatched jars, declaring herself head of charm. On the morning of the ceremony, Raya stood barefoot on the porch, her white dress simple and soft, her hair pinned back with sprigs of lavender. She looked out over the field, where rows of wooden chairs faced an arch wrapped in ivy and twinkle lights. Tasha appeared behind her, adjusting her earrings. "Are you ready?" Raya turned. Her eyes were clear. "I've never been more ready." Across the house, Zane buttoned his shirt with shaking hands. He trimmed his beard, threaded a sunflower into his lapel, and checked on Sienna twice in the last 10 minutes to make sure her cape wasn't dragging through the mud. Marcus, his best man, clapped him on the back. "You look like you're about to walk into battle." Zane laughed under his breath. "Feels like I already won." The ceremony began with the soft strum of a guitar. Guests turned in their seats as Sienna marched proudly down the aisle, cape billowing, clutching a small bundle of daisies. When Zane followed, his eyes locked on Raya's. She stepped into the aisle, barefoot still, toes brushing the grass, and as she walked to him, every moment that had brought them here flickered behind her eyes. The karaoke bar, the sandwiches, the secret, the reveal, the forgiveness,
The love.
They met under the arch, hands joined. The officiant, a retired librarian whom Sienna had insisted was a perfect choice, smiled gently. "Marriage," she said, "is not built on the grand moments, but the quiet ones. It's built in burnt cookies, in bedtime stories, in the space between arguments where you choose love again and again." "Do you, Zane, promise to keep choosing Raya?" His voice was steady.
Ido.
"And do you, Raya, promise to keep choosing Zane?" "I do," she whispered, her voice thick with joy. The kiss that followed was not dramatic or choreographed. It was warm, certain, and entirely theirs. The reception unfolded under strings of lights and a canopy of stars. There was no stage, no speeches. Just clinking glasses, the scent of grilled peaches, and music that made people sway barefoot in the grass. Zane pulled Raya close during the first dance. She rested her head on his shoulder, their fingers intertwined. "You know," he murmured, "when I first saw you, I thought you were just passing through. A beautiful woman who liked free fries." "And you," she said, smiling against his neck, "were supposed to be a guy I met once. Instead, you became my everything." Sienna twirled nearby, her cape catching the wind, her laughter rising above the music. Later, as the guests began to drift toward the bonfire, Zane and Raya slipped away. They walked to the edge of the field, where the grass whispered against their ankles. "Do you ever think about how we got here?" she asked quietly. "All the time." And he turned to her, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "I think fate's a lot messier than people say. But it knew what it was doing when it dropped you into that bar." Raya leaned forward until their foreheads touched. "I didn't know what I needed until I met you." They stayed like that for a long time, the stars blinking above them. Months passed, then seasons. Sienna started 3rd grade, her cape retired in favor of a science-themed backpack. Zane opened a small garage of his own, with Raya quietly backing the lease, but never interfering. He hired 2 apprentices from the local trade school and painted the walls with sketches from his notebook. Raya stepped back from the day-to-day operations of her company, focusing more on community initiatives. Together, she and Zane launched a program that provided free car repairs for single parents once a month, operated out of a shop. They spent weekends in the upstate house, letting Sienna chase frogs by the stream and teaching her how to make pancakes from scratch. They argued sometimes about laundry or forgotten errands, but always ended the day curled together in bed, their legs tangled, their hearts still reaching for each other. One early spring morning, Zane found Raya in the kitchen, barefoot again, standing by the stove with her hand resting lightly on her stomach. She turned when she heard him, her eyes shining. "I was going to tell you after breakfast," she said, handing him a small, white envelope. Inside was a card with a single sentence, Sienna's going to be a big sister. Zane didn't say a word at first. He simply wrapped her in his arms and held her like the universe had handed him every miracle at once. Later that evening, they told Sienna together, seated on the couch with a bowl of popcorn between them. Sienna's eyes grew wide. Wait, I get to be the boss of someone? Not exactly, Zane said. Raya grinned. But you will be the coolest big sister in the world. Sienna squealed and threw her arms around them both, popcorn flying everywhere. And as the three of them laughed, wrapped in a quilt that still smelled faintly of campfire and cinnamon, the love house that Sienna had once declared became exactly that. A home built not from wealth or titles or carefully curated secrets, but from honesty, from forgiveness, from choosing each other again and again, without hesitation, forever.